Welcome back, everybody. Mark with ExoticCar PlayPlace here to talk about the top 5 things clutch related you need to know about a 13-year-old supercar like my E60 M5 over here. Well, 13 years old because this one's an 06. This would apply to any 07s, 8s, 9s, and 10s as well. So let's go for a ride. So before we get started, everybody, before we get rolling in this discussion, please make sure you give my channel a like and subscribe. If you haven't already subscribed, please do. And if you have, thanks for coming back, everybody. So let's get rolling. So of the top 5 things, the first one, of course, is how many miles do you get out of a clutch? Number 2 is we want to talk about the launch control and the S6 mode as well. The third thing is the clutch replacement cost. The fourth thing is aftermarket options for clutches. And the fifth thing happens to do with SMG Adaptations. A special little topic, very technical there, but we'll touch on it very lightly here today. So the first thing we want to talk about is clutch life. How many miles can you expect from a clutch? Well, in the early days when people didn't really understand fully, how much abuse and what it took to drive these cars properly, there was a lot of clutches burning out at 30 to 40,000 miles. But often, most clutches generally lasted in that 70 to 110,000 mile range. If you drove it moderately, yeah, you use it, you drive it in a spirited fashion, but you definitely took care of it and you did the right things and didn't abuse it all the time. So there's many factors that go into this. Do you drive it in automatic mode? Do you drive it in manual mode? What shift speed do you operate it at? Launch control operations, how many? And do you drive typically in stop and go traffic? These all have very large impacts on the life of that clutch. So basically, as a rule of thumb for this, my best recommendation for extending the longevity of the clutch on these cars is drive it in medium speed, so about S3, but of course drive it in the manual operation. When you operate the car in automatic, it tends to do a little bit more slipping. The manual operation in speed 3 is the most happy place. If you go too slow a shift speed, what ends up happening is the car takes up too slowly. It slips the clutch a lot more on acceleration, and as well, if you dial it up too aggressively, say S5 or S6, that becomes a very abrupt start, a very abrupt shift, and often takes a toll on the clutch because it's shifting very hard and it becomes a lot more shocking to the driveline. So the second thing you need to know about these clutches is 2 special features, one being launch control and the other one being S6 mode. They both have a very significant impact directly on the clutch life of the car. The launch control has a direct impact by when you activate launch control, what that it really effectively does is revs the engine up to a preset value of RPM engine speed, and then followed by a quick dump of the clutch, resulting in either tire smoke and brisk acceleration or clutch smoke, in which case that's why we're talking about this today. Now the other topic is S6. That is the S6 mode, which you can only activate when you disable the DSC. So the S6 mode we talk about as well has a negative impact on the car's clutch life. And that is because S6 is the 6th dynamic sporting shift speed setting that you can alter or you can activate, but you can only do it under certain conditions. And that's why they leave that as not a default function, but something you have to make a definitive conscious effort to do to operate. And how you operate S6 is, what you effectively do is you press the DSC button, which effectively disables your traction control. That once that's taken place, then you adjust your toggle, your shift speeds all the way to the right until you get that 6th bar. That 6th bar is only available when you disable traction control. So there's 2 negative consequences in activating S6. Number 1, you lose traction control, so it's great for a track, but the other one is obviously it's detrimental to clutch life, and therefore should only be utilized when you're really, really trying to extract that last bit of ounce of performance out of the car. So the third thing that you need to know about the clutches on these cars, how much do they cost? Well, these cars, when you talk about parts and labor, and we'll talk about specifically only the stock components, we won't get into the aftermarket stuff yet. Under stock components, you can expect a tab of about $2,500 to about $3,000 tab for a replacement clutch on the E60 M5. Now keep in mind, of course, some people you get the car under the knife and you have this feeling that you want to cut to the chase and do it on the least amount of money as possible. But I would highly recommend that when you do the clutch change, don't forget to make sure the flywheel is in good shape, and more importantly, of course, check to make sure your throwout bearing is replaced as well, and any other bushings that may be applicable to this installation. Don't skimp on that, otherwise you might be going back in a lot sooner than you had hoped. So the fourth thing you have to know about these clutches are, yes, in fact, there are aftermarket options for this. Now you got to expect, usually in the aftermarket, they're not, in these kind of parts, on these kind of cars, you're not typically expecting job or low cost parts. In this case, aftermarket usually means performance related. They want to talk about cars or parts that, hey, somehow add performance capabilities to these cars. And that is what we're talking about here. So the M5 here, as an aftermarket option, just say CNS Racing, for example, has an option. It's a twin disc Kevlar and carbon graphite combination that has a total clamping force of over 1,200 foot-pounds of torque. So that far exceeds anything that you would expect from a stock clutch. This here might actually be a great option if you're looking at upping the ante for horsepower. You want to do the stroker kit, you want to do a supercharger kit. I would recommend going at one of the racing options for clutches. Don't necessarily stick with the stock. You might be sorely disappointed with the clutch clamping capability on that car. So if you are bumping the power dramatically, look at the aftermarket, and CNS Racing has one for about $3,200 for the parts, so it's not inexpensive. However, if you need the performance, it's certainly there. And the added bonus is it will operate and drive very similarly to a stock clutch configuration, and therefore you don't have to worry about judder and pickup. A lot of Kevlar clutches, I know on the Lamborghinis and whatnot, there's options. Some are better than others. No two Kevlar setups are the same. Some are very jerky and you activate the clutch and it'll surge on you, or it won't do anything at all. And so some Kevlar clutches are very aggressive, so you have to do your research on anything. And that same thing goes here for the M5, because like I said, some will just grab and launch, and other ones will jerk you to death, and other ones will drive very similarly to stock. So what you want is a stock feel. That's ultimately what you're looking for, with better clamping force. So the fifth thing you have to understand about these clutches is sometimes it's not as simple as just putting a standard clutch back in or an aftermarket clutch. Sometimes there's settings that have to be altered. Sometimes you have to make adjustments for changes in the system. It doesn't always necessarily operate exactly as you would expect it to, and therefore there is a little thing called SMG Adaptations. And so there's software utilized by people who typically know how to operate this equipment that can run through and make adjustments, make settings in the software that affect the way the car picks up. Does it hold or release? Does it judder too much on a takeoff? These are all factors that you have to consider, and sometimes these settings have to be changed if the clutch doesn't operate exactly as you would expect it to. You need to sometimes make software changes to allow for these impacts, these positive impacts on performance. So there's, like I said, there's certain software that you need to utilize to make these changes. And there's a lot of people, if you want more information on that, of course I can share in days to come, of course. However, in the interim, there is information on blogs, certainly on the forums, that get into a lot more detail about how this whole system works. But at the end of the day, if your clutch is brand new, you've just put in a new clutch and the car's not working properly, maybe you need to check some of the settings on your car's programming for the SMG 3 transmission. So everybody, as always, it's Mark here signing out. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Also, like, comment, and share this information with your friends out there. I'd love you guys to come back for more. I want to see more and more of you guys engage in my channel. I love sharing this info with you guys, and I'd really love to see you on the next one. Talk to you soon, everybody. See you then. Bye-bye.